Good afternoon and welcome to Jazz Vespers. Today we have with us Wayne Hawkins on piano. Always enjoy a Wayne evening. On AV tonight we have Nathan. I'm Martel. Marjorie will be running a little late for refreshments. I think Peg is in there getting stuff ready for her. And this evening we're going to do things about change. There will be some change coming up in Jazz Vespers in a month. I am usually your host. Joe Doolittle usually pops in once a month. But in a month I am changing place, I'm changing location, I'm changing positions, and I'm moving to the Connecticut coast. So we'll have different people and different ways of doing Jazz Vespers. But tonight, we will have change brought to you by Wayne as he plays most of the evening away. Wayne, our first piece is Bouncing with Bud. You want to say anything about it, or?
Sure. This was written by the great jazz pianist Bud Powell in the 40s, and he was one of the first great jazz composers. And so I'm going to do my best with this. Bouncing with Bud, please.
The next piece that's going to be played is Moon and Sand, and I've always been intrigued with how the changing moon, how it waxes and wanes, actually changes the feelings of people who see it. We feel differently when we're standing in the full moon and than we do when we are noticing the waning moon, or the hope that's actually embedded in the human spirit when we see a moon start to wax. What about this piece's?
Well, it just kind of makes me think of being on a beach, maybe in the summer at night, and seeing the sand, and maybe me and my wife, or anybody with another person that they just want to enjoy a quiet evening. Maybe there's some nice waves going at the same time. Just a nice quiet thought.
I understand. I love walking the beach at nighttime, and I like doing it alone. I'll be living on, like I said, the coast, and I'm really looking forward to walking in the sand at nighttime,
There you go.
especially under a moon. It's like one of my favorite things.
Exactly.
So.
Yep. This is Moon and Sand by Alec Wilder.
So Wayne, the next song is "In Love in Vain." Is all love vain, or is like this is a question I'm wondering reading the title. What think ye?
Oh, I think it's an unrequited love, really. I mean, certainly, yes. It's a you could think of it as a vanity project, certainly. But I believe it means it's a torch song, kind of a thing. Shall we go?
Please.
Okay. This is a Jerome Kern song. Jerome Kern also wrote All the Things You Are. Okay.
So when I think of change, I think of high school and college chemistry classes where the sign for change is a triangle. Remember that? change of, and the triangle, and which is also when you get into theology and you start talking about Trinitarian theology, the sign for that, for short, when you're writing notes quickly back in the day when you actually had to write notes and not type them, was a triangle. And I always thought it was very interesting that the sign for change and the sign for Trinity were the same thing, but we're taught that God never changes. And I have a real problem with that. And I used to get in trouble in seminary for arguing that maybe God does change. God ontologically changed once when God became human and God took on human nature. Wasn't that a change? Wasn't that a change? And maybe that's the beautiful thing, that maybe God is unchanging, that God is constantly changing or growing or loving. Which would probably get me kicked out, or if I lived 400 years ago, killed by the Spanish Inquisition. But the truth of the matter is I've always been intrigued by this sign of the triangle that means both change and something that's never changing. Our next song, Everything I Love.
Yes, this is Everything I Love by Cole Porter. And I'm really broken about that. But it just so happens that in the sheet music, sometimes you see a chord sequence is written usually the same way. And just to echo you, that my first chord is an F major 7, and it's using a triangle for the.
There is a method to my madness, right?
Which goes to show you I'm a true nerd, and I'm not going to apologize right now. Okay, here we go. Everything I Love.
I'm not familiar with the next piece, Wayne.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Where's it from?
I really don't know if it's from a musical, but it's called Darn That Dream. Anybody familiar with that? Oh, it's a gorgeous ballad. You know, I might help sell some of these some of these songs to people, but it's a Jimmy Van Heusen's piece. So I assume it was a Broadway piece. I really don't know.
I'll look it up later.
Yeah,
When this plays, I just don't know it.
it's gorgeous though. I tell you. Let me give it a shot. So yeah, this is another one of those that whatever the dream was didn't happen. Darn that dream. Yeah, here it is.
Beautiful. Today in church, we celebrated our last week of the season of creation, and we were celebrating animals. And so I chose for a reading a biblical farce, Balaam and his ass, and had a great time playing with words that were laden with terms like assume and assiduate, and anything that had an ASS planted somewhere in between. I've always had this twisted and weird love of farce and forcing it upon other people. And so today, when I was told that the theme was going to be change, I thought about the day that I was in working on my doctorate, and I had a very serious, artistically inclined, heady professor who was very much into things that were esoteric. And we had a task to write a paper on a poem that were to develop the philosophical examinations and concepts of religious traditions. And he wanted us to write on someone or poetry that was written by the likes of Rilke or Wallace Stevens. And of course, beautiful stuff. But that's not what I do. So I chose to write on the 7 spiritual ages of Mrs. Marmaduke Moore by Ogden Nash. Now, most of you know who Ogden Nash is, and I am a big fan of Ogden Nash. So when we're talking about change and theology, and we're going to throw it together, nothing says change more like the 7 spiritual ages of Mrs. Marmaduke Moore. Mrs. Marmaduke Moore, at the age of 10, her name was Jemima Jovins then, was the quaintest of country maids, her pigtail slapped on her shoulder blades. She fed the chickens and told the truth, and she could spit like a boy through a broken tooth. She could climb a tree to the topmost perch, and she used to pray in the Methodist church. At the age of 20, her heart was pure, and she caught the fancy of Mr. Moore. He broke his troth to a girl named Alice and carried her off to his city palace, where she soon forgot her childhood piety and joined the orgies of high society. Her voice grew English, or say Australian, and she studied to be an Episcopalian. At 30, our lives are still before us, but Mr. Moore found a friend in the chorus. Connubial bliss was overthrown, and Mrs. Moore now slumbered alone. Hers was the nature that craved affection, so she gave up herself to introspection. Then, finding philosophy rather dry, she found peace in the sweet Baha'i and Baha'i. 40, and still an abandoned wife, she felt old urges stirring to life. She dipped her locks into a bowl of henna and booked a passage through to Vienna. She paid a professor a huge emollient to demonstrate what his ponderous volumes meant. Returning, she preached to the unemployed the gospel according to Sigmund Freud. 50, she haunted museums and galleries and pleased young men by augmenting their salaries. Oh, it shouldn't occur, but it does occur that poets are made by fools like her. Her salon was full of Fragapini, Romanian, Russian, and Histandutini, and she conquered par as well as bogey by reading a book and going yogi. 60, and time was on her hands, maybe remorse and maybe glands. She felt a need for free confession to publish each youthful indiscretion. And before she was gathered to her mother's to compare her sinlets with those of others, Mrs. Moore gave a joyous whoop and immersed herself in the Oxford group. That is the story of Mrs. Moore as far as it goes, but this I am sure. When 70 stares her in the face, she'll have found some other state of grace, Mohammed, or maybe her Lord and Master, or Zeus, or Mithras, or Zoroaster. For when a lady is badly sexed, God knows what God is coming next. He loved me as a professor, just so you know. Our next song is I'm All Smiles.
Yeah. How appropriate. Yep. For those of you who are counting, this is in 3. So every time you think about 4, just subtract 1. We'll be good. And this is an arrangement I came up with. It's not incredibly original, but you're stuck with it.
So the next piece is W.C. Fields, and I know there's a bad pun in there somewhere.
There is, yeah.
And so I'm going to hand it over to you to explain. But when I think of it, I don't think of autumn, I think of spring. So it's all you, Wayne, all you.
Okay, it's on me. It's on, yeah. Well, there was a comedian in the 20s and 30s by the name of W.C. Fields, and there was a composer right around the turn of the century named Debussy, Claude Debussy. So put them two together, and it makes no sense at all. But hopefully, hopefully it's neither funny or too impressionistic. Who knows? But I believe it sounds a little bit like if Debussy were to play jazz, it would sound a little bit like this. I'm not sure if I wrote it in the spring or the fall, but you know, I just sat down and came up with it one day. And here is W.C. Fields.
Now, I don't know if the changing of leaves had anything to do with the choice of the topic, but we can't be in autumn without thinking about the changing of leaves and the changing of colors. And we can't go out to our cars without seeing golden leaves sitting on top of them, right? And the crunch underfoot when we're walking at nighttime that we may not see, but we hear. So I'm going to read a poem by Richard Moore. Richard Moore was a poet who spent most of his life in California. He went to the university out there, and he wrote this poem for Kenneth Rexroth. Kenneth Rexroth used to have a group of the poetic community in San Francisco for years meet and share their work. Richard Moore wrote this in 1950. He passed away in 2015 in California, I believe Northern California. He and a group got together once a week to protest war and protest anything that was not to do with life and peace and beauty. Like I said, he passed away in 2015, but he wrote this poem in 1950. Held in a late season, at a shifting of the worlds, in the gold balance of autumn, out of love and reason, we make our peace and stand still in October, in the failing light, and sought each other in each other, ease. And released from silence, from the slow damnation of speech that is weak and falls from silence. In the October sun, by the green river we spoke. In October, the leaves of the water maple fall. But whatever we said in the bright leaves that were lost, quick as the leaf fall, brittle, but blood red.
Wonderful. The next song is written by one of the founders of the Bossa Nova, and his name is, of course, Tom Jobim, also known here as Antonio Carlos Jobim. And of course, he wrote Girl from Ipanema, but he wrote over 600 songs, and they're all wonderful. And so he's this song is called Photograph, and I believe my interpretation is it's basically maybe could be, I think, reminiscing over who's in the photograph. So it could be a loved one or someone who maybe someone who's older and looking at a picture of them as a younger person, or someone who's passed. But it's up to everyone to interpret it as they like. And this is, this isn't played very much in the States, but I played in a Brazilian group for many years in Kansas City, where I'm from, and so I got exposed to a lot of great music, and this is one of them, Fotografia.
So, Wayne, the last song you have on this list is For All We Know, and I was wondering if it was All We Know from 1934 from Coots that was made popular again in 1972, or was it For All We Know that was written in one original song in 1971, sung by the Carpenters, or a mashup of the two?
Well, the second one, not that at all.
Okay. Like I said, just wondering.
No, it's okay.
So we're doing 1934 Coots, right?
1934 it is, yes. But I might quote the other one since, you went there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Works for me.
Okay. Oh, this will be not interesting at all. Yes.
Woo! Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you, Wayne, for beautiful piano playing. Beautiful. Wayne?
Thank you for the opportunity.
Nathan? Marjorie?
Yes.
Peg? And I am Martel. See you next week. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, guys.